Okay, hey, how's it going? Alright, we're going to talk about some social studies right now. We're going to use it for other things throughout the week, but we're going to get started right now when we're going to talk about Chapter 3, Section 1, the Early Israelites, and this begins on page 200 of your textbook. It's only like 5 pages long. I would suggest you read it as well as going through this, the flip chart that I'm going through right now. Okay, so let's get started. First thing we need to do is we need to set up our notes. And we're going to use our Cornell notes. And our essential question for this section is, how did the religion of the Israelites shape their culture? It's a very important question, and we're going to have some other things that go along with that. Left-hand margin, your first question right here is going to be, who were the Israelites, and why do we care about them as a people for us to study? It's a very important question. They have a lot of influence, and we'll talk about that more. You'll see right here that I have another word in the left column. We're going to define that in a minute. Okay, so let's move on. The first Israelites. There they are at the mountains. I think that's Aaron, Moses' brother. We'll talk more about that. All right, your standards. Cite specific textual evidence to support analysis of primary and secondary sources. Determine the central ideas or information of a primary or secondary source. Provide an accurate summary of the source, distinct from prior knowledge. Remember, when we talk about a summary, we're not talking about telling me everything about it. I'm summing it up. I'm getting the key points. I'm putting those key points down so that I can look at them quickly. All right. Distinguish among fact, opinion, and reasoned judgment in a text. That's going to be important. That's always important in history because people have opinions about things in history. Okay. Our essential questions: how did the religion of the Israelites shape their culture? And then your margin question for the first part is, who were the Israelites? As we've already said. Okay. I don't know how many of you have ever read the Bible, and this is not gonna. I'm not trying to talk about religion here. I'm trying to talk about the facts of how it shapes their cultures. When we studied the Mesopotamians, as it says on the board, the Egyptians, they had many things in common. They relied on the rivers. Remember, Nile, Euphrates, Tigris. They had those floods were important. And they built empires. They went to war and tried to conquer other people so they could get more land, more farming land, more river. And so they relied on those things. They both tried to do those things. Now, the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians, they both had a boatload of gods and goddesses that they worshipped, as did the Greeks and the Romans, right? Same gods. As the Greeks and Romans shared the same gods, but they changed their names. But they still had this big amount, this huge, what's called a pantheon of gods. They had all these guys. So you see all these, they had this big dude right here that looks like the Hulk, and then there's this guy who looks like Aquaman or something, and all these other, and I'm not making fun of them, I'm just saying, they had a lot of gods, and they had a lot of different qualities, and they worshipped them for different reasons. The Egyptians had Isis and Osiris and all those Re and all those guys, and covered up by my little thing down here, my control box. But the point is, they all had a lot of gods. Now, there's a difference. We're going to come into a new era now, where the Israelites believed in one God and one God only. The one true God. He was it. He took all the things that these guys had, all the qualities, all the powers, all the things that these guys had, and they all went into one person. And so the Israelites came up with this theory. Now, I know we talked about Amenhotep, or Akhenaten, who started this idea of the one God, Atan, But that didn't take. It didn't last, and people didn't believe it. The Israelites believed it with their heart and their soul. Everything about the Israelites was shaped by this belief, and it goes a little bit further than that with them also, but we'll talk about that. The belief in only one God is called monotheism. This monotheistic belief became the religion of Judaism, Jewish people or Jews. Judaism also influenced Christianity and Islam. There are a lot of similarities between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. There are some big differences, but there are some some things that are very, very similar. They all three faiths have one God, and they call him by different names. The Jews started out calling him the Yahweh. Christianity calls him just God or the Lord, as the Jews do, and so does Islam. Islam has other beliefs that they have to talk about, and you're going to study more about that in the coming years and such. Oops, let me go back here. I want to move this on so you can see. Okay, so who were these Israelites that had such a huge impact on the world? These three religions had a huge impact, but they all come out of this monotheistic beliefs that first started with the Jews, or Judaism. The early Israelites were nomadic herders. Remember when we studied early man that nomads don't have a set place to live. They move around all the time for grazing, following food, following water, plants for their animals to eat. The nomadic Israelites' entire life was their religion. The Israelites believed they had a covenant with God, and this all started with a guy named Abraham. Now we know about Adam, we know about Eve, but the covenant, this covenant with the Israelite people starts with Abraham, and it still affects things today. That's part of the reason it's a really important concept. But it starts with Abraham in that he was told by God. He basically made a deal with God, and that is called a covenant. When Abraham made this deal with God, it was called a covenant, and that covenant goes two ways. The covenant says that as long as the Israelites would obey God's laws, they're going to get the land of Canaan. They get to live in the land of Canaan, and it's theirs. And because Abraham made this deal, this covenant with God, he's the one that God spoke to. He is considered to be the father of the Israelites, of the Jewish people, the Judaistic people. Not of everybody in the world, but the Jewish people in particular. Abraham was the person God made that covenant with. He spoke for the Jewish people. God told him, look, he's not a young guy, but God told him, if you obey my laws, you keep this covenant, then your descendants shall number like the sands of the beach or the desert or something. So the covenant is an agreement between God and the Israelites. The covenant, it's like a contract between the two of them, and it's a very binding contract. The covenant said that if the Israelites worshiped the one true God, they would get to live in the land of Canaan, and it would be theirs forever, or as long as they lived by God's laws. Now notice, it says they have to worship him and live by his laws, one and the same thing in their minds. So that's going to have a huge impact on the things they do and how they view the world and how they run their countries and stuff. And here, down here, you can see, here's Canaan, right here. So when God speaks to Abraham, he's over here in Sumeria, which is in Mesopotamia, as you recall. So they have to travel from here over to Canaan, and then their journeys continue from there. But remember, this land, according to this covenant, this land will all be theirs as long as they live by God's laws and worship God. Now Abraham passes away. He leads his people to Canaan. or almost to Canaan, but he passes away. Now, he had Jacob, he had 12, he had a grandson, and his grandson's name was Jacob. Jacob was also known by the name of Israel. Well, yeah, guess what? That's where the Israelites get their name from. They're named after this guy. It says, Israelite, it's the one who struggles with God, because there's a biblical story of where Jacob he wrestles with an angel of God until he gets his blessing. And finally the angel gives the blessing. So that's where the Israelites took their name from. And if you look at their history, or if you read the Bible, you'll realize the Israelites struggle with God throughout the Old Testament. In the Christian Bible, it's the Old Testament. In the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew Bible, it's the Torah. So Jacob had a large family. He had 12 sons. And those 12 sons and their children and wives and all of those were then divided into tribes or family groups. Each son had his own tribe. These are the 12 tribes of Israel. You have, Zebulun, Gad, Judah, Reuben, Joseph, Asher, Dan, Simeon, Benjamin, Issachar, Naphtali, and Levi. Now, each one of these groups was assigned a job. The Levites were the priests and the go-betweens for God. Right? He had 12 sons, 12 tribes. All right. Now, okay. So there you go. We learned what monotheism is. We learned how the Jews got their start. The Israelites, the Jewish people, got their start. Now your margin question number 2 for the left-hand margin. Why were the Israelites in Egypt instead of Canaan, the promised land? Remember, Abraham was promised by God that as long as his family, his people, worshipped God, the one true God, and obeyed his laws, they would be able to stay in Canaan and own that land. Well, remember, okay, so why did they have to end up in Egypt? You know the story of the Ten Commandments with Moses and everything. So why did they end up? Remember, Abraham started over here in Samaria, travels into Canaan, and now he's going into Egypt, and where the river, the delta is, and he comes in there. And so why were they there? Well, they were there in Canaan for 100 years. But then God struck them with a drought. They kind of drifted from the covenant. God said, all right, you're not living up to the contract, so, I'm going to wither your crops and all those things. So they end up having to go to the fertile lands of Egypt. Well, the Pharaoh of Egypt says, oh, all right, we got lots of people to use as labor now, so we can build all our monuments and our pyramids and stuff. So he enslaves the Israelites, and he used them as free labor. I mean, they're not exactly, he still had to, feed them and house them and stuff, but you didn't have to feed them well or house them well. You just wanted them to be able to get some work done. So it was cheaper, and it made life easier on the Egyptians because they could benefit from everything the Israelites did without actually having to pay for anything very much. Or pay very much for anything. All right, so then this goes on for a long time. The Israelites are downtrodden, they're feeling really bad, some of them are praying to God for freedom, and God says, fine, I'm gonna go to this guy out in the wilderness named Moses. Now Moses had lived in Egypt. He didn't know at first that he was a Hebrew. He thought he was the son of the royal family of Egypt. The story where in order to avoid a rebellion by the Hebrews, the Pharaoh of the time, Ramses II's father, orders all children under a certain age, under a year I think it was, or up to a year, were to be thrown into the Nile, to be drowned or eaten by crocodiles. So Moses' mom says, "Oh heck, I can't. That's not going to happen." So she takes and puts him in a reed basket that she made, puts him in the river, seals it up, puts him in the river, lets him drift down. And who should find him but Pharaoh's daughter? And she adopts him as her own. I'm pretty sure she must have known what was going on, but you can speculate on that yourself. All right, so around 1290 BCE, remember this means before Common Era. That used to be BC, before Christ, but that's the new term is BCE. So circa, which means around 1290 BCE, God tells Moses to go to Egypt and free the Israelites. Well, the Pharaoh's he doesn't like that. That means that the Egyptians are going to have to start working. They're not going to want to build these things, statues and monuments to him. So Pharaoh says, "Nah, not going to happen. That's not going to happen." And Moses comes in and he's putting his staff, turning it into a snake, and he bangs it on the ground and says, "Let my people go," and all that stuff. And Pharaoh says, "Yeah, whatever. See you later. Hit the bricks, bud." So, all right, but Moses has powerful friends because, he's got God on his side, So God says, "Fine, you're not going to let the people go. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to put 10 plagues on you." So he puts all these 10 plagues. He turns the river to blood. Frogs and pestilence come out, and all these, locusts eat their crops. The cows die. Things are getting rough. But still, Pharaoh says, "No, I'm not letting your people go." So then, the very last one, the 10th plague, the Jews are told, the Hebrews are told, put lamb's blood over your door, around your front door, and because the angel of death is going to come and visit Egypt. And if you don't have that blood on your door, that lamb's blood on your door, your firstborn child is going to die. Because all of the Egyptian firstborn children will die. Well, the day after that happens, the Egyptians are like, Pharaoh's like, "All right, fine, take them, get out of here, leave." So they take a bunch of gold, they take a bunch of jewelry and all this valuable stuff, and they head off, the Israelites head off into the desert, led off by Moses, where they're going to wander around for about 40 years. Well, while they're wandering around in the desert, and this is the beginning of what's called the Exodus. This is the second book of the Old Testament, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's the second book. So the Exodus begins, and there are some really important things that happen during the Exodus. Number one, Moses receives the 10 Commandments. Now, you still see in many courthouses, not so much in California, but in other places in the United States, you'll see the 10 Commandments up on the walls of the courthouses, because the 10 Commandments help to shape the moral and the laws of nations for centuries. They still influence them today. He also God also gave Moses the power to part the Red Sea, because the Egyptians had a change of heart and said, "Hey, they killed all of our children. Why would we let them go? So let's go kill them." So the Egyptians are following. They're like running up behind the Israelites, and you can see the Israelites down here. There's the waters all parted right here. You can have different, people are gonna, you can feel about this, but this is God parts the Red Sea using Moses as his tool, and they cross. Now, as they get across, the Egyptians are in hot pursuit, and their chariots, their lights and sirens on their chariots and stuff, and their horses, and they come down here into the Red Sea. And as they get into the middle of the Red Sea, God says, "Okay, time to put it back together." So, and then the water all flows in, and the Egyptians die. Okay, so the Israelites are safe. They're across the Red Sea. They've got a sea separating them from the Egyptians, and they're heading back into Canaan. But they're not there yet. They got a ways to go. They got time. They got thousands and thousands of people. So they've escaped the Egyptians, but they're not back to Canaan yet. And here are the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are the moral laws. They shape the moral view of nations for centuries. They give some basic rules to live by. And here they are. You don't worship any god except the one true God. You don't bow down and worship idols. Now, some people would say, well, isn't this, if God is saying this, isn't he saying there's more than one God? Well, not necessarily. He knows how people are. He knows that people will make things up in their mind in order to get what they want, to feel like they're in control. Okay, same thing with the idols. All right, now, some people feel that this means, this one right here, number 2, means you don't build statues, you don't build likenesses to, or paint pictures of Jesus, or make statues of Jesus, or the prophets, or anybody else. You just worship them in your heart. That's for people got to look at evidence and make up their minds about these things. All right, don't misuse my name. Well, you all know what that means. You see that, hear that in movies a lot now. And there's a misspell right there. Remember, should be have another M. The Sabbath day. There's debate on what the Sabbath day is. Respect your mother, your father and mother. I should have an R right there. Right here should be. Wait, there's an R right there. Your mother and father, your father and mother. Don't murder. Be faithful in marriage. Don't steal. Don't covet things that belong to other people. Don't tell lies about other people. Don't bear false witness. Don't go and start saying, hey, they stole my pencil. And when they didn't, you just don't want to get in trouble for losing it. So don't tell somebody that they stole it when they really didn't. The Ten Commandments apply to everyone. That was one of the big significance of the Ten Commandments, was that it didn't matter if you were the king or the lowliest peasant. These laws applied to everyone equally. All right, they developed the understanding that law should be the same or equal for everyone, the rich and the poor. That's what the Ten Commandments tells us. All right, the Torah is the first part of the Hebrew Bible and what Christians know as the Old Testament. When Moses received the Ten Commandments, he also received a covenant from God. And that covenant was that they would return to Canaan as long as they obeyed God. These laws and this covenant are parts of the Torah. So the Ten Commandments is part of the Torah. The laws are part of the Torah. And basically, that was what I had to tell you guys. Excuse me, I've got... now, you should have... I'm sorry, there should be a third question of what are the Ten Commandments. Well, we went through that. That should be our third margin question. Should be, what are the Ten Commandments and why are they important? There they are, right there. That's it. I told you. Now, I know I kind of rushed through this. Hopefully this is kind of this helped you out. If it didn't, remember when you watch this to form your questions, write your questions down. Make sure you bring your questions with you so that I can answer them in class, all right? You guys can all reach me through the Edmodo and all that stuff. So drop me a line if you have questions on this. I'm going to post this on the Edmodo. I'm sorry about the typos, but they happen. And so there we go. All right, I'll see you guys in class. Bye.